over 40s or the crisis is like a fear. Yeah, it's a fear. It's a fear of not honoring your transition. That's how I see it. It's a fear of not honoring your transition. And if we look at, say, E of the fear, it's about you not really challenging what your emotions are around it.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action, to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the 10X for Gen XYZ podcast. I'm Mark Adair Rios.
And I'm Zach Winter.
And it's a pleasure to welcome to our podcast today Caroline Brown, an emotional wellness coach and integrative therapist based in London. Now, Caroline is the host of the Crazy Over 40s Life podcast. She has a book by the same name out right now, which is all about helping people navigate the challenges and opportunities of starting over in their 40s. With her Master's of Science in Forensic Psychology and a BA in Social Work, Caroline is an expert at understanding the human mind and helping her clients achieve emotional wellness, which is very much needed right now. And as a busy mompreneur herself, Caroline knows firsthand how difficult it can be to find a balance in life. But when she does have some downtime, she loves nothing more than indulging in a little cupcake or two and getting a relaxing style. So let's sit back and relax and learn from Caroline's vast knowledge and experience as she shares with us today. Welcome, Caroline. How are you?
Oh, you are so kind, Mark. You are so kind. Thank you for the introduction. I do love my cupcakes.
Oh, man, I'm coming out of winter.
Oh, yeah.
All of the pastries are, I'm just like, all the bells right now. We've had these storms.
Yeah, I love comfort foods. Good old comfort foods. Yeah, yum, yum. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. That was a really big mouthful. Bigger than the cupcakes. It was lovely. Thank you very much.
Well, it's great
nice to see you both, Mark and Zach.
Yeah, good to see you too. So let's start out by telling us a little bit about your background and then what you're doing as an emotional wellness coach.
Sure. So if people don't know already, the Crazy Over 40s Life kind of leans into why I'm here today, really. It's all about kind of getting to a space in my over 40s where I had to reevaluate things. And that's why we call it the midlife crisis, but I call it the Crazy Over 40s Life. It sounds better. It sounds less mental health. It sounds more clinical friendly, and it's not a mental health problem, but if it's not tackled quickly enough, it can spiral into a dark space. So how did I get here? Well, my first degree was social work, as you kindly pointed out. So I've always had an interest in children and families and well-being. And my first step into social work was really around adoption. So I had the beautiful space and connecting children who needed families with people who really wanted to be parents. So that was a beautiful space. And that kind of catapulted me really to think about what is it that people need in order to feel fulfilled. And some of it is becoming a parent. And some of it is actually finding what your interests and hobbies are. So fast forward a little bit, many years later, I then stepped into the world of my psychology part, which, the forensic psychology. And because I was working with children, and so let me know when I'm going too fast and you understand
tell
my
us
British
what that
accent.
means. That's a little bit of a term of art, or at least a term I'm not familiar with. What is a forensic psychologist?
Right, so it's understanding the mind and behavior of those who are victims of crime and those who commit crime, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a big shift for you from working with helping people with adoptions to forensic psychology in the crime field.
Well, you may, true. You may see.
Ask based on that. Sorry, Caroline. I was just going to ask based on that.
Okay.
Also, in your social work, were you involved in the foster system as well? So were you seeing a lot of that and that's one of the pathways into what you were doing?
Well, actually, the pathway, well, I was it's a good question to ask me. The pathway was really I went heading with adoption, actually.
Mhm.
And then as I was doing adoption, yes, there is a side sort of part that you do in adoption that you can't avoid, which is fostering. So most of these children are in the foster care system, and you obviously there supporting them whilst they transition into adoption space. So yes, I had worked with those who are in the fostering space. And for the very first, I think my agency was one of the first actually that dealt with transracial adoption. Yeah, because I don't know whether how it is in the US. I think it's a lot different now. But at that time, they were making same race placements or same place parent and child adoption in terms of culturally and racially. So it had to be matched.
Wow.
But the agency I worked with saw something very different. And I must admit, I had my concerns in the beginning. I think, how's it going to work? If this person is obviously of a different ethnicity, different culture, how are they going to meet this child's needs? And what I learned is that it wasn't so much as the physical characteristics of the family that were important. It was the personal characteristics. Who are they as a people? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to accept there are differences and accept those differences? Those were the important questions one had to ask. And I must say it was a life changer for me because I saw race and culture, one, to be respected, but to ignore it, that it doesn't exist. You know, when someone has a colorblind approach, some people have a colorblind, like you, they don't see race, they don't see color.
Right.
I think that is a very no-go area, really. I think one should always look at someone's race and culture, because what you're saying, that I respect that who you are.
Right.
We are maybe culturally, racially different. We may have the same values. Doesn't mean to say you're of a different culture, you don't have the same values or ethnicity, and because that changes, right? So, so I'm in the UK, and I may have something more in common, say, with a white British person than if I was in the US. But then there are things that connect me again with a person of my color in the US. The fact that we may have historical oppression or trauma, that's what would connect us. And there's some things that we know because we may watch the same things, may have the same interests, we're drawn to the same beliefs system, because obviously things are handed down over time. But yeah, it was a door opening for me, but I see things very different through my experience in adoption.
Were you in a position were you kind of at the policy level in learning to implement these things, or were you working more on a personal kind of one-on-one basis with parents where you could implement some of these ideas or I guess progressive thoughts and ask the questions directly to the parents?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, absolutely that.
Yeah.
I wasn't on policy level because I felt that that would take me away from something that I love doing. Because what I found, those who were creating policies, I'll be frank, they didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
They weren't having the day-to-day experiences with these families, with these children. And many times their motivation wasn't really about the family or the children. It was maybe to do with resources, yeah, political differences or similarities. Yeah, there weren't at times, not say all because that's unfair to say, but my work was done person to person, which I felt I made more of a better impact. But no, policy didn't interest me. But actually, working independently for myself was really important. So by the time I was 2 or 3 years in, I was private. I worked as a private consultant.
Oh, wow.
That was important to me, to have independence.
Nice. And were you helping at that time, arrange, was it all in country for you in the UK, or were you helping to arrange foreign adoptions as well? And young babies over for parents who couldn't adopt, locally, I guess.
Yeah. So international adoption, no, that wasn't part of my role. But strange enough, as you say it, we did have a department that would liaise with an international adoption agency. in some circumstances, where there'd be a child that's abroad and they had family here, and they wanted to make the adoption happen because they wanted to keep the child within the family, the birth family. And so it happened to have a birth family in the UK. So that's when it would happen. But obviously things have changed. It was some years ago, I stepped out of adoption, I think about, say, oh, goodness, in the 2000s, maybe in the 90s, yeah. Yeah, I'm showing my age now.
Wait till we talk about our dates.
So how did you decide you wanted to get into forensic psychology? I mean, switching over into a criminal related field.
Well, actually, some of the children that were being placed were mature children. They were children in their teens, right? And they were the most difficult to place, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what I saw were children that were in need of support. That's what I saw. And I felt, well, you know, I always had the interest in psychology. You know, I'm one of those people who would go to the crime channel instead of going to something that was a bit more therapeutic. You know, I always had interest in crime. So I thought, well, you know, why don't I marry crime with family, you know, do something that I can support people and do it in real life. So I didn't think it was much of a difference. In fact, it kind of blended my knowledge even more, because obviously working in adoption, you're going to have things such as abuse and so on.
Yeah.
So that was very important for me to get a better understanding of. So yeah, that's when I jumped into that. And then I started to work for the youth justice, and that was an experience as well. I supported children moving forward with their lives, which can be difficult. Right. And a lot of these children came from really good families. You know, what was quite clear is that societal challenges put a lot of pressure on families. When you've got families having to go out and work, and this is really interesting because I knew when I was growing up, you know, you had a parent that would go out to work, or a stay-at-home mum, right? That was the thing that happened. But nowadays, that two parents have to go out to work nowadays to make ends meet. And so what you're finding is that some of these parents are out and these children are kind of left alone. Some of these children have learning needs. A lot of the children in, I don't know what you refer to it there, but who are in a secure unit or in crime, have learning difficulties, or are neurodiverse, right? ADHD, on the autism spectrum, dyslexia, find it very difficult to remain in school, find a peer group that they can feel, this is easy. I could belong to something, I can mean something. And so they gravitate, it's less work. But in the long run, what it does, obviously, it tears away of who they are, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Someone tells you you're no good, then you end up down a road where you kind of end up saying to yourself, I'm not good at all, because I'm getting into crime, I'm hurting people, and I'm hurting myself.
Are you able to? I'm still trying to, you know, kind of make some of the connections here. So it's a big part of the work in forensic psychology to be able to help the subject really map out exactly, you know, kind of maybe what happened in kind of a past tense in order for them to, I know that most of psychology is like that, but I'm imagining like you being able, when I hear forensic, you know, I think of CSI, you know what I mean? Somebody going in and really nitty gritty details about.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's the reason why we're just wondering about.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Psychology, right?
Like, what are you doing with? What's your job function? Are you coming in after a crime has been committed and you're being retained as a consultant to advise as to there's these children, their psychological condition? Or are you, or do you have a different role that's not directly related to a crime being committed?
Right.
Yeah, well, I think you're referring to a forensic scientist, you know, someone who analyzes a crime scene, right? That's what you're referring to. So this is more of a therapeutic or an understanding of the mind and the behavior and the reasons, and also try and turn it around so they become rehabilitated, right? And so a lot of my work will actually, people work in different places. You know, they can work in obviously the prison, they can work in hospitals, they can work in parts of social services, what we refer to here, which is the like the older children. So they can work in different areas. I work for, I sat on the youth justice referral panel. So what will happen is that children will come in who've committed crime, unfortunately, and the judges said, right, we're going to give you a chance. Okay, we're going to give you a chance. And so I will be part of the panel who will assess that and see ways that we could rehabilitate or kind of work with them, support them therapeutically, so they don't end up committing crime for the rest of their lives. It's a chance for them to turn their life around. So that's where I was working and supporting those children.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough work working with kids because you're bringing on a client that's had a lot of probably tremendous trauma throughout their life to get to that point where they're in the criminal justice system, and you're trying to help them kind of rehabilitate their life and get grounded again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be difficult, it can be challenging. But I suppose what maybe it helped, maybe it didn't. You know, my experience going into social work, I think it kind of, I don't want to say it hardened me, but what it did, it's kind of made me see things in a I was very much focused on the client. I didn't let my emotions run away with me. Okay, so I was able to do my work effectively, but it's not to say that at times I went under maybe a child that really kind of, you know, stayed with me, a situation that stayed with me. I know that when I was in the youth justice department, there was like this parent and she was sobbing and she was saying, you know, I do everything for my child. I don't know how we got here. I just don't know how we got here. And I saw her son turn to her and I said, I'm so sorry, Mummy. You know, and it's like, oh, and I just thought, God, it could be, I mean, she was a hard worker, she was working at the bank. So it's nothing to do with status. It's nothing to do with economics, finances most of the time. But yes, there are places that are deprived. Parents are struggling, as I said, that may contribute to it. But a lot of these parents are trying to make things work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, I mean, listen, it's a pretty old story, right?
Yeah.
In our culture, which is increasingly kind of secularized, and work is like for most everybody paramount, right? And so we had the term back when we were growing up, you know, latchkey kids, which is pretty much basically the same thing.
That's right.
And there was a kind of a danger of falling in with the wrong crowds and really get involved, you know, like where I grew up, really get involved with some of those crowds as well. And I honestly, I look back and I don't know how, you know, my mother did the best she could, but I don't know how I made it through because I was fringy, you know, and all of a sudden here I am, you know, and some of my friends, not so much. It's just, you know, it's almost, there's a little bit of I don't know, I look back and go, okay, you know, there's some, you know, some being well adjusted, but like also choices and luck play into it.
Choice and luck.
You know what I mean? I hate to say the word luck. I don't believe a lot of it.
I do believe in a lot of luck. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think if you look back, perhaps there was an intervention. Yeah. There was an aha. Yeah. Right. So those who are fortunate to have that, you know, makes a whole lot of difference. Yeah. A whole lot of difference. Yeah. For sure.
Interesting.
How many years were you doing that work, Caroline?
Oh, for about 3 years. And then actually I raising my family, that was we're going to go on to the other part, but yeah, it was nice, but I really wanted to kind of create something different for myself actually at that point. Yeah. And it's quite interesting when you're in something, sometimes it's a great place for you to kind of reevaluate what you want to do, who you are, your values. And for me, I needed something a bit more creative. yeah, a bit more creative. And so that's kind of where it's kind of led me into kind of this space. But still, you know, I have a focus on emotional well-being. And so, yeah, I'm not far from that, but I'm doing it a little bit more creatively, which is good.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about, the work you're doing now as an emotional wellness coach.
Yeah. So I have a program called Emotional Essence, and essentially it's kind of homing into who you are. Who are you authentically, who you are? And it's kind of taken from Carl Jung, you know, who is believed living authentically. And I'm a true believer in that. And I think that's what the midlife crisis is about, is kind of when you kind of stray away from your identity, not knowing who you are truly, because a lot of things get in the way. You know, we inherit our family's values, right? Our parents' values.
Yeah.
Depending on which culture we're from, we inherit that. We go through the schooling system, inherit that. Social media, well now, but back then there wasn't there. But, you know, you've got your peer groups, you've got your friendships, and then you go into your work environment. And then depends on where you work, there are expectations from your employers, right? You kind of fill in, you kind of conform to your workmate. So you don't want to feel that you're sticking out like a sore thumb. So all those things. And then by the time you get to that point, you think, God, who am I? Who the hell am I? So that's where the crisis becomes. You're reevaluating who you are. Essentially, you're asking questions. What are my spiritual beliefs? You know, what do I like? You know, not just like, do I like ice cream or so on, but what are my desires? You know, what makes me tick? I think these are some of the questions that people do ask, and you know, it does impact relationships, unfortunately, as well. If you're in a marriage or a partnership, it can affect that. If you become a parent, yes, you know, you're focused on your children. But again, you know, you're more than just a parent. And these are the things that can leave you very much dissatisfied, I feel. And so that's what the Emotional Essence program is about, getting back to the essence of who you are. That's what it's about.
And is your niche working with people who are at kind of that stage in their life where they may or may not be having a midlife crisis, but they need to kind of step back and reevaluate where they are and do a little discovery?
Yeah, definitely. Mine is all the over 40s, although strangely enough, my podcast actually attract people under 40. So we've got the millennials actually wanted to know what they got ahead of them. My God, you've got a lot, millennials.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, my life honestly has been a series of midlife crises since like 19.
Yeah. You're approaching your fifth midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But it's also because I was in the entertainment industry. And so there was just, you're always asking that question of who am I? You know, what am I doing?
Right.
Constantly. Right. So
do you have to, okay, so being in the entertainment industry, do you have to remain quite youthful?
I don't know, like maybe it happens
internally.
Maybe it happens naturally for some, you know what I mean? Like
right.
there was a big time when I was smoking and drinking coffee a lot, right? And so the reason why I wouldn't quit that stuff was because I felt like getting a little character in my baby face would be helpful to be on camera or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you go.
Is that what you call it?
Right?
Okay.
Now I'm like, what the hell? I don't want that. But you know, the question I had, I guess, is from what you see. I'm always very interested in this whole crisis part of it, right? Because it's a term that we've all grown up with, right? And sometimes it's a throwaway term to describe someone really going through some stuff, but sometimes not. But it's still kind of labeled a midlife crisis, and so I'm just wondering. The people that maybe might come to you, are they in the thick of it, or is it just those questions that you talk about that they're not really a crisis, right? But they are just kind of stuck a little bit, or is that all part of the crisis? Like from the standpoint of, hey, everything was going so good, you had kids, you had a great job, you know, all of this, you know, 19th and 20th century kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah.
You know, am I making sense there?
Yeah, you are. And all of that is true at the same time, because I see the midlife crisis is not a mental diagnosis. That isn't it.
Right.
But I think the crisis is because we are not honoring our transition. Okay, like we go through different stages of development, don't we? Okay. Why is the over 40 any different? We wrestle with stagnation. That's what it is. We need to be seeing, to be fulfilling something. You know, for those who've been able to, well, through choice, went to university, got their career, found their partner, had children, right? They're doing all the things what society expects them to do. And then they get to a point where, okay, is this it? No, you've got many other stages to go through. And I think that it's a transition of confidence and acceptance. I always say the over 40s or the crisis is like a fear. Yeah, it's a fear. It's a fear of not being honoring your transition. That's how I see it. It's a fear of not honoring your transition. And if we look at, say, E of the fear, you know, it's about you not really challenging what your emotions are around it. And if we look at the other letters in the fear, you know, if we've got E, you know, excessive. Some people have excessive goals. Some people have too many goals and they don't really home in to what they really want. You know, and then, you know, as you go through, I think people say for the R, remoteness, people are removing themselves gradually from their true values because they don't want to see they're not doing the right thing. I think we take on too many pressures of what other people think we should be doing because we're expected to actually do the right thing. There's so much morality that's placed on us. I think when we get to a certain age, like you should know better. You're old enough. Why are you making so many mistakes?
Mhm.
Why aren't you settled? All these things that makes you feel, God, I'm a bad person. Why shouldn't I be settled? I've gone through all these stages. I should be grateful. Some people aren't able to achieve these things. But I think you have to measure yourself by your own pace.
And do you have, that's really interesting. Do you have clients that come to you that have like, they've done all of, as you're saying, the things that society expects you to do? You've married, you've raised kids, you've had a job, and now you're at a point in your life where maybe your kids have moved out, they've gone to college, they're getting married, and you know, do you have clients who are then questioning, well, is this it? You know, is there greater meaning? And they kind of maybe go into a depression because they don't know what to do next. They've gone through all the steps that society kind of expects them to go
That's a
through.
great point. This whole empty
Yeah.
nesting, as well as
God,
like I was just going to
huge.
ask about the physical kind of triggers, right? What you're talking about, Zach, or menopause for women or men.
Yeah.
There's a certain point when, you know, they stop being, you know, people stop paying attention to them right around that age as well, right?
Yeah.
Women, obviously, generally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, typically those who, well, my typical clients are those who have done everything and wonder, why am I feeling so goddamn empty? You know, why am I feeling that there's something more, right? So there's something more. And it's, for me, I always say, honor how you feel. Honor how you feel. That's the first step. It's important to honor how you feel because to ignore it means that you're ignoring the basic need to honor your desire. You need to feel that whatever you're going through, there is a part of pleasure to it all. There is some pleasure to it all. And obviously we need pleasure, you know, dopamine is good, you know, makes us feel good. We need dose, right? We need the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the endorphins, all those things for the over 40s is very much needed. The levels change, right? The levels change as we go through, and even more so in our over 40s. So that's why I say it's very important to be intentional be intentional with what your journey looks like. And then the other thing is honor your beliefs and your self-awareness. Honor your transition. That's the other part. So in my book, I say 5 things. There's 5 steps. So it's honoring how you feel, honoring your transition, honoring your relationships, dancing with your mojo is one of them, and how to nurture and nourish your mind. Okay.
What is dancing with your mojo?
Oh, that's the end part of it, you know. It's like unapologetically be who you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't think that I was going to kind of transition to where I'm at now. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because no one goes into a marriage wanting it to end. But that was part of my transition. Without the marriage ending, I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have created my podcast. I wouldn't have gone into my emotional wellness coaching. So, okay, so one of it I do say is that say goodbye to things that don't serve you well. Okay, say goodbye to things that don't serve you well.
That's got to be very difficult for your clients to have that recognition that, okay, I'm not happy in these aspects of my life, but change is scary, and especially dramatic change, like, okay, this person that maybe I've been married to and raised children with, you know, for 30 years, I'm not happy. And so you have to work with clients in very difficult situations and getting them to honor their mojo, which may mean separating or making very scary life choices that are new. And
yeah, I mean, I would say to anyone, don't dump your partner just like that because you're feeling a bit tired or exhausted. There has to be something more than that. I say to anyone, if your relationship is going through a little bad patch, put some effort into it, try and make it work, because there are going to be changes that maybe can impact not only financially, emotionally, but the dynamics, the family dynamics, the friendship dynamics, the social dynamics, all those things that you've become used to. And the thing is that there was a research done and they asked women, how do you feel after now you've divorced? What happens when you are in a relationship? You do become one, your image, your sense of self becomes one. There's not a separate you. And it's after, and that's one of the things is that when people divorce, they do begin to understand, create who they are. They start to understand that for all this time, they weren't really living their own lives. They were actually integrated, and that's not a bad thing. As long as you find that you're sharing the same values, and this is why relationships getting to a bit of challenges, is because you could be in a relationship and you both share different values. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Say, for instance, if one of your values is honesty or integrity or creativity, and you're with a partner who you can't be honest with. You know, I don't feel loved, I don't feel wanted, I don't feel appreciated. You're not able to express and show those values. You're not able to be authentically transparent with your partner. And that's going to wrestle with your values because you're not being honest and open in that marriage. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's where the wrestling comes into it. So what I say is with anything, when you get into a relationship, you're not really yourself. I don't think anyone is. You know. And then as you begin to enjoy the relationship, then you begin to understand there may be a future. Then bit by bit, you start to peel away your layers, you become more vulnerable. And sometimes you take a step, right? You take a step, oh, will he accept me, who I am? I'll test the waters a little bit. What I say is always try and be yourself in relationships from the beginning. That's what I say.
Yeah, that's important. If you're working with a client and they're having some relationship difficulties and you're advising that they have, you know, couples therapy, do you refer them out to someone else who specializes in couple therapy, or are you also providing that therapy guidance?
Yeah, well, I must say that I am an integrative therapist. So but I don't counsel couples. Okay, so there's two parts to my work, so I should have said, right? So I'm an integrative therapist, so I'm in private practice there. I work with trauma work, and I work with people who are neurodiverse as well, okay, ADHD, on the autism spectrum. So work with individuals. I don't work with couples. If that's the case, like it's happened to me, where couples will come forward and say, could you work with us both? Some therapists will, at the time, they're not knowing that they're working with the couple, will actually do it unknowingly. But I also feel that it may be a conflict for me a little bit, because I want to make the client comfortable that they can talk about all areas of their life, including their partner. But it's be a bit unfair if I'm knowing something that the other partner told me, right? I think that'd be really unfair. So that's why I don't. But yes, they will have to be referred if they want couple counselling. And I have a referral list anyway that I can cut therapists that can do couple counselling, but I don't see couples.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What's your it sounds like, you know, a lot of your clients have kind of a beginning in a path that they travel along, and kind of I don't want to call it an exit, but just kind of on the backside of your program, right? So what is kind of what is your ideal kind of situation or endpoint for some of your clients? Like, what do you like to see them doing, you know, or having come from and moving into?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, okay, let me go back to the work that I do. So part of it is I'm an integrative therapist, okay, which is more deeper work. And the other part is I'm an emotional wellness coach, which is non-clinical work, okay, non-clinical population.
Right.
And so for me, that part of the work means that I can touch on areas where they need to go a little bit deeper. And I suppose that's the beauty of my training, is that I can do that. Right. Some coaches can't and really shouldn't, really, in all honesty. Right. So, but I can do that work. So in terms of beginning to end, actually, I can integrate a lot of stuff. But if they're coming to me for coaching, which the two are very separate, okay, if they're coming to me for coaching, yes, I will see what work they would need to go through in order to reach their goal. And for me, it's about emotional wellness, about the over 40s. So allowing them to become authentic, that's the journey. Allowing them to become authentic with themselves and not feel guilty or unapologetic for it. Right. That's the goal of my emotional wellness coaching. So with that, I work on resilience. I work on limiting beliefs. I work on the inner child. I do quite a lot of work actually on my program, and it's just kind of like ongoing as well as one-to-one, but mainly in groups, which works well. And it's not just based here, it's global. So I work online with that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So how do the groups work? Is that is it for a set period and you join a group, or is it ongoing?
Well, initially, that's how it started. It was I did a program set. And then I realized that a lot of people actually enjoy being part of this family, right? They enjoy being part of this family. So what I do is I phase in, and then they phase onto another phase, if that makes sense. So they come in. So like if you're a well-seasoned person that's come on and you've done the whole program, then there's another part to it which is very much supportive, but still I create content for them to actually work through as a group. And then those are coming along, they do part of it, the main part of the work, I would say, and then they go into the supportive group. So everybody feels that they're at the same pace, at the same stage. I think that's really important when you're integrating people. I want people to feel comfortable.
And the groups you're doing them like on Zoom or some type of online format?
Yeah, Microsoft Teams. I don't know if
right.
Yeah, I use Microsoft Teams. Yeah. But online.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the interaction you find works even though it's not in person, it's online. People are still able to connect.
Yeah, there are. I mean, for instance, the only work that I actually do in person at times is when I'm in private practice
Mhm.
with my integrative work, my trauma work. That is the work that I do in person, but also online as well. I do that online as well, since the pandemic, right? So
Right.
I do that online, yeah.
Yeah.
And the coaching I find quite easier to do online because then you can get people to hop in, and some people are a bit more comfortable sharing when online. When they're in person, it's a slightly different atmosphere. When online, they can kind of be in in the blanket, covered up on their blanket, get comfortable on their settee. So yeah, it's not supposed to feel like school in any way. It's a bit more relaxed than that.
Yeah. And they're in a comfortable environment that they're comfortable in. If they're getting online in their homes, there may be a greater comfort level.
Definitely, definitely. And I find that from them. And so yeah, it's a wonderful experience. A little
Interesting.
bit of a community there. Yeah, it's growing. It feels nice.
Oh, that's great.
Have you found
Yeah.
a tick up post-COVID in people kind of seeking out your type of work? I was going to ask about some of the, I don't want to say marketing aspects of it, but
Hmm.
just, you know, and this is no knock on what you do, but I'm just
Hmm.
wondering if there's a resistance to people moving, forward willingly. Like I'm working with an
Hmm.
emotional wellness coach, right? And kind of coming out
Yeah.
right and saying that, or I'm in an emotional wellness group. But I also,
Mm.
on the other hand, I also see a lot of acceptance of mental health issues being more in the forefront now.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
people are more and more willing to talk about that stuff too. So what kind of
Mm.
you do you find troubles kind of penetrating, or is it easier now post COVID and it's easier
Mm.
to get people to come along?
Yeah. Well, I actually started the emotional wellness group around COVID, actually.
Hmm.
And I found that people still wanted to be seen, still wanted to be heard, still needed support. They still want to feel that they're part of something.
Right.
That's what they wanted to feel. And I felt that it was a good time to launch not only the emotional wellness program, but obviously my podcast at the same time. And so that was a good fit. So everything kind of blended together. It kind of worked. And so those have come forward, obviously heard about my podcast, what I do. And so, yeah, it's been a natural progress,
Love that.
organic. It's
Yeah.
been organic. Yeah. And I'm not in the hurry to kind of, and I've been wrestling with this quite a lot, I must admit, about what do I do? Do I go out there and do a big woo? When I mean that, like a big marketing campaign. And I thought, no, what I want to do is feel also, I'm enjoying the whole experience.
Yeah.
I want to feel part of this journey. I don't want to feel that I'm part of a big market thing happening
Yeah.
out there. I
I think
want to feel in touch.
the whole with the podcast, it's brilliant for I think what you do, because you know
Thank
you're
you.
you're able to you're able to get people to listen to what you're doing and kind of lay a
Mm,
foundation without putting that one label on,
yeah.
so you don't have everybody just thinking, oh, Caroline is just the emotional wellness coach, whatever. It's like people who listen to the
Okay.
podcast get to do all those other things that you're talking about, right? They know
Mm,
that if they're going to join your group, they're being, supported and part of a group, and all of those things that can take them somewhere. And it is emotional wellness. It's just that the labels
right.
aren't there, and they're learning about it through your podcast. So I think it's a
Right.
great way of getting the word out
Thank you.
for sure.
Oh, Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, and that's part of it, really. It's part of the beauty of it that I came into it, wanted to enjoy the whole experience. I actually did it as something that I thought would take away some of the boredom, honesty, but
Mhm.
it kind of leaned into something that I was already going through. So it felt natural. It felt like I was very much into it because I was into it. It's part of my passion. I enjoy learning more and more about myself. That never goes away. And the time that I don't have that passion is the time that I say, okay, I need to move on to something else. And the beauty about the podcast, as I said before, is that I love to be creative with my work. And so it's another part of me that's obviously out display. I'm a big talker. I love to listen, but also I like to put spin on things. It keeps me active.
Yeah.
Caroline, I have a question. I mean, you started the program up in the middle, like right when COVID was hitting, right? Or at least podcast started like in April 2020, right? So
Yeah.
we're in the COVID lockdowns. You're starting this emotional wellness coaching program, and
Yeah.
a lot of news reports about, emotional wellness and people, doing poor during the lockdown because they're more isolated, and divorce rates have been up because these couples
I
are,
know.
together all the time, whereas before they were going off to their separate working environments. So to what extent have you seen like instances of that in the work that you do? Were you seeing some stress caused by COVID with your
Yeah, most definitely. There were families who couldn't be open and honest about what they were going through in fear to make the other person upset. If they had no space. So what was happening is some of these families were living in very small homes. Some of them didn't even have, say, a garden. So you can live in an apartment, okay. But the thing is that it was very much about, how do I communicate with my partner about how I'm feeling? But I don't want them to feel upset. That's what it was. And where do I go? Where is the space for me to kind of escape to or withdraw to if things get a little bit challenging? And also finance was a huge thing. Some people were losing their jobs, right? And so that was putting a lot of pressure on families as well. So also sex was a big thing. When you're out at work, you have an excuse not to come. When you're at work, you have an excuse not to be intimate. You come back, I'm tired. But if you're at home all the time, what's your
excuse
what's
now?
Like,
right? Women, people can't be honest, like, I just can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered. I'd rather eat the cupcake.
Talk about mojo. Get your mojo back.
Absolutely. So those are the things that were happening. And so it was really about how, and at that time, people were thinking, God, that person's really irritating me. Is it because I've outgrown that person? I'm not quite sure, but something's missing. This was some of the times that they kind of feel, maybe we're not suited. These were some of the things for the very first time people were asking themselves.
Interesting.
Wow. So are you seeing now that, things are starting to get back to normal, that those kinds of issues are going down?
But is normal, is that old normal a good thing? Right? Like,
yeah, that's a really good question.
Going back to this whole midlife crisis thing, where the term, I believe, came from a perspective of, you're ruining this perfect life that you have. You work a corporate job, you got everything, an American or a British person, an English person might want, and you're ruining, right? Like, is that back to normal? Is that good, or is that right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think people are used to the new normal. What was happening is that people were afraid to now leave their homes. Yeah, they're so used to being at home, they're afraid to go out. A lot of people have social anxiety.
Wow.
They prefer to be at home. And so that was a huge challenge for quite a few people. And then, what is the new normal? The new normal now is taking a huge turn, really, because things like keep moving. People don't have time to sit back and kind of allow themselves the space to go through their processes. Now they feel that they have to keep running along with it all. But what's happening quite interestingly is a lot of employers are actually putting aside or pulling the fund, or what would you call it? Part of your allowance. So your work allowance includes emotional wellness or therapy. So a lot of people are getting that part of their package. So there is a lot of that's happening for a lot of people. And so they're using that to obviously work through some challenges they may be facing.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the younger gen. So right now, what's going on, at least here, is Gen Z, as we call them.
Oh yes, I know them well.
In their early 20s, or
Yes.
early to late 20s, they're
Mm,
really kind of shaping how the workplace looks. And
mhm.
part of that is this kind of insistence on, personal time off, PTO, and other things that don't
Right.
tie them to their jobs and emotionally and physically and all that, like we're used to in our parents before us.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very interesting because some of the things we look back as Gen Xers, we're just like, just do it, man. Do you know what I mean? But they have a whole different,
How dare you?
they have a
How
whole
dare you
different thing
question?
that's a little bit different to kind of, every generation is going to look at the younger generation and say, yeah, you guys are lazy. But they really are shaping
Mm,
how employers are looking at, young talent. And it's a big,
yeah,
giant generation coming up, that's affecting,
definitely.
you know.
And what I have noticed actually is that they are saying that they're no longer working for free. They're no longer wanting to work for free. How dare you ask me to work for free?
Yeah,
These are the sort of things that we would say, oh no, you've got to show your worth,
put your time in.
but yeah, but it's one thing that I must say, and I give them credit for, they know their worth. They're
Yes.
beginning to understand that when the time they're born, they are worthy. Our generation, we had to graph our worth, right? It was shown in what we're able to produce. Now the Gen Z, well, I don't need to produce anything. I know I'm worthy. Why do I need to produce anything? Yeah, which is very
It's
different to our generation, right?
it's really incredible to kind of watch that play out. I don't know any answers,
Mm,
just a spectator really, but like it's
me
really
too.
interesting to see.
Well, I've been talking with a few. I was actually in a business meeting earlier this week, and there was a discussion we were having about employers in a number of different fields right now who are really having difficulty with employee work ethic. And though it wasn't necessarily tied
Okay.
to one age cohort, I think part of it,
Yes.
another result of the COVID lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders and everybody working remotely, it's impacted work ethic in a number of ways.
Okay. Right. So what our employers are saying about that? What are they wanting from these
They're
people?
seeing things like, people who are working at home, they're seeing instances where they're not working or they're falsifying their timesheets and doing other
Oh, I
things,
see.
you know,
Right.
or
Okay.
it's hard to get people to come into the office to work.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
you know, so, they're having
Mm,
difficulties, and the labor market here continues to be very tight, right? Even though,
okay.
our Fed has been raising interest rates and trying to reduce demand to address inflation. The labor market is one area where they haven't really been able to impact that, and it continues to be very tight. And so from an employer standpoint, you're struggling with trying to find new employees, but you're also dealing with a decrease in work ethic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I mean, the beauty, as I said before, with the whole pandemic, it's kind of encouraged me to continue to work the way I do.
Yeah.
And it's given me the luxury really of trying to manage home life and work life, which before would have been quite challenging, really. I can't imagine life before all of this. In all honesty, it's given me the opportunity to kind of work with whatever I want to work with, and that's what the COVID did for me.
Yeah.
And as you spoke about, what are your changes?
Well, I mean, Mark and I used to have an office, and during the shutdown, we gave that up, and we both worked from home. And I guess some people have difficulty working from home, too many distractions, but Mark and I don't
Okay.
have that problem. I mean, I'll get up, and I know Mark gets up very early as well because we're emailing each other at like 6 a.m.
Oh
And
God.
sometimes on busy days, I'm just grinding, and before I know it, it's 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. And
Yeah.
so it's been fine for us. And so I don't have a problem working from home. I think it's fine.
I don't
Yeah.
either, but I think we're, I think that there are certain instances, especially in corporate, where doing remote work, which was absolutely necessary because of the environment for a period of time. But just like when inmates are kind of running the asylum, they're always finding creative ways to get around rules. And the whole Zoom thing, to Zach's point, just opened up a can of worms. I think it's too tempting to not be distracted when you're supposed to be at work. It's too easy when you have at your fingertips, a Google search that can find you a program that could, help you record clicks while you're doing something else. Like a lot of young people, that's the work ethic you're talking about, right?
That's true.
They find ways to game the
So
system.
true.
That's I have to say, and I love America, but that's also truly an American thing too. It's like we definitely find ways to be quote unquote more efficient with our time. You know what I mean? Like, and some people might call it cheating or whatever, but it opened up a can of worms that I don't think anybody knows how to put back in, because like Zach said as well, the labor market's so tight. Some of these employers are just scared not to allow remote work when a group of employees are like, we're coming to the office, 4 days a week or 5 days a week. Sorry.
Right.
It could really, and it was terrifying during COVID. And so.
Yeah, I think people are really relying, like we're doing on Zoom right now. We're using Zoom.
Yeah.
I think it's a very useful tool to an extent, but I think it's being overutilized now. I'll give you two examples. One of the persons at this meeting I was at earlier this week is a mediator, right? He's an attorney who acts as a mediator and mediates disputes. And he said, everybody wants to switch to Zoom mediation. Nobody wants to drive out to do the mediations and meet in person. And so now like 90% of the mediations are done online by Zoom because it's so convenient. But the settlement rate has dropped tremendously because they're not in person. You're not engaging one-on-one,
Right.
and so you lose that ability to try to negotiate a settlement because of that lack of presence.
Wow.
Yes.
And I was also talking with an attorney. It's a family law attorney, a litigator, and the court system similarly uses an online tool like this. So all of the attorneys sign in online and they wait for their case to come up on the docket. And he's one of the few attorneys that will actually go to court because he recognizes the value of being able to argue a case in person. It's to communicate as an attorney in a case, you want to be present, you want to have those verbal skills, those, the way you gesture and you point to documents, and you lose all of that if it's just online. So
interesting.
Yeah. Well, I can see that actually happening if people have confidence in you, right? If they pick up your energy, it's all about sometimes the energy is really important sometimes, isn't it? And when people are making decisions about something, and people sometimes rely on their gut, right? The second brain, right? The feeling of like, oh, does this feel right? And sometimes you can pick that up in a room.
Yep, that's right. I think that's right.
It's very true. And there's a if we're talking about the courtroom, right? I mean, pretty well documented that there's a theatrical part of that as well.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah.
Now you're adjusting, and me coming from the acting world, there's an adjustment from being on stage to doing TV where it's more technical, and you start learning the technical part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so then you can start playing around within that. So as an example, we know that this is being recorded. Now, when we do our edits don't include all three of us. It really focuses in typically on the person that's speaking, and this is right, and then we'll do cuts that'll flash over to somebody's reaction, if but generally it's whoever's
That's
speaking.
right.
It's our cut.
Yeah.
So we know, like when you're talking, Caroline, we know, just like TV, when you're talking, if you're talking a bit, we can take a moment to take a sip.
And I can't.
Because I'm not on camera.
You're not on camera.
It's very interesting how you adjust. You can't do that in a courtroom or in a live in the room.
No.
I mean, obviously, if you got to take a sip of drink, you got to take a sip of drink. But I guess the point is to make clear that it's a different dynamic and different ways of approach. And the other thing I was going to say, Zach, with your mediation thing, I wonder how much involves people kind of being embarrassed to not negotiate when they're, it's a rare few people that can really go in and be like, hard-nosed negotiation. Most people, when they go in, they try to work, because there's a social thing about trying to work it out, right?
That's right. Yeah, if they're live, you get more. You can put your guard down, right? And as a mediator, it's easier to facilitate that. Lower the guard. Stop taking this hardline position.
Right.
Let's be reasonable. But if it's just online, it's harder to do that, to achieve that.
Interesting. That's crazy.
It is. It is. I've been watching courtroom in process, and I must admit, when I don't see the courtroom people all there and presenting their argument for and against, I don't get that joy when it's on the online. Is something quite removed from the experience. And part of it is that I want to feel that it's quite strange. I was going to say that, because when you're watching a film, you can feel that you're involved, but there's something about real life, isn't it? There's something about real life that we feel that we need to kind of connect with the person or the people in certain situations. And we only could do that if we see them actually live in action. There's something about that.
That stupid Johnny Depp trial was like,
oh my God,
it was so compelling, right? Yeah, he's a big movie star and all that stuff. There's a train wreck aspect, but we wanted them to cut over to her reactions when he said something provocative, or vice versa, or a gotcha moment, and like sometimes they gave that to us, and then you can turn on out here. We have a channel. What's it called, Zach? It's not PBS. It's the court. We have a court channel.
Yes. Is it Court TV?
No,
Court
it's
TV.
more like
No.
It's like a public service channel. I forget the name of it, but turn on just about any day, and you'll get, congressional hearings or court.
C-SPAN.
Yeah, C-SPAN.
Okay, right.
And sometimes when you're watching, you're just like, wah, wah. And it could be a murder trial. It's just like,
I know. We're twisted.
Like, come on, guys, spice it up, man.
I was watching something like that today. I know. I said who's got convicted recently? That man, he had his son and his wife.
Murdoch.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was really fascinating. I think I watched 3 different versions of the documentary of his life and his family. I'm so sad.
So now we get it. That's the other thing, is like it's like we, there's a coordination from all channels, right? Like you get the Hallmark movie or something, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, you get the Hallmark movie or something a year later, 2 years later, maybe, just on that one. They have exclusive rights. Now, because we're all streaming, you can log in on Netflix and get something, and then HBO has something, and now you get all these different documentaries from different channels that you log in, because we're support. Right? Absolutely.
And you can go on YouTube and everybody else is doing their own version of what happened, and it wasn't even there. I don't know what they do. But yeah, I mean, things have changed, haven't they? Goodness.
Well, hey, you know what? I think we kind of went over time, so I love that we have conversations like this that kind of and this has been really, really fascinating. I love the work that you do.
Honestly,
I coming out of this just coming out of this recent period, really, that's one thing that, when I look around, and I have a lot of people that are close to me that, have had difficulties during this time. And so, mental health is a real thing, and you're seeing it kind of out there. And I just love that people are, working with you to kind of work through a lot of that stuff too.
Caroline, tell the audience how they can find out more about you, your website, your book title again.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to say about my podcast, right? The Crazy Over 40s Life. I have been, I'm nearly to my 100th episode, and I didn't think that was going to be possible. I don't know far along are you guys with your episode, but
it's amazing.
Yeah, how far along are you with your episodes?
We're close to 40, about 40 something, 45, 40.
Wow, that's incredible.
Our third season right now, we're banking it up. So
yay.
Pretty incredible, because we didn't think it was going to go as long as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you never do. And that's what's the beauty of podcasts. And then now, people are flooding in podcast world. So it's very hard to get, to the right audience, but I'm glad mine has grown organically. And so, yes, so on the podcast, The Crazy Over 40s Life, we publish every episode every Thursday. And recently I've done things on love's sex and porn addiction. And so that's an episode coming out. We also cover this lovely lady who's got this company together, and she very much works on children and online grooming. So we've got a lot of fascinating things coming out, really, and people who are into alternative kind of lifestyles in terms of intimacy that will be coming on the podcast. So we do cover a whole range of topics on my podcast, as well as coaching, entrepreneurships, and obviously Mark came on, and Zach, Zach came on, and he contributed to my podcast. So thank you, Zach. And so the other thing is that my book, 5-Step Challenge to Understanding Your Crazy Over 40s Life, which I shamelessly have here. And so in it, really, essentially, I have 5 steps, and it's one of them is honor how you feel, honor your journey, honor your self-awareness, honor your relationships, and honor your mojo. And just gives you 5 simple steps to go through to try to get a grip of some of the transitioning challenges that you may be having as well. I also have my emotional wellness coaching program, which the next program is out in September. So stay tuned for that. I also will be going on.
What's your website name? Where can they find
that?
So
it's, the crazyover40slife.com. Okay. Yeah, so that program will be coming out in September. And I'm on all the social media sites, so Instagram, Facebook. I'm going to be going on TikTok for all my sins, but I thought I can actually share a bit of who I am on TikTok. So let's see how that goes. So you'll be seeing me on TikTok.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Caroline. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's lovely seeing you guys. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Zach.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye, audience. Thank you for having me.
10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winner and Mark Adair Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.